So a little over 5 years ago, I boarded a plane, and I had no idea how much that plane ride would end up changing my life. Midway through the flight, we hit a patch of turbulence. Now, I'd experienced turbulence before, but for whatever reason, this particular bout of turbulence really scared me. It had me completely uneasy. And for the first time in my life, it really made me think, what if this is it? What if there's something wrong with this plane? What if it goes down? What if this is how it all comes to an end for me? And I started thinking about my family. And I had 2 children who were in kindergarten and preschool at the time. I really started thinking about them. And in hindsight, probably not my best decision, but not long before I boarded that flight, I watched the documentary on United Flight 93, the one where the hijackers overtook the plane. So, I probably wouldn't recommend that, but I did. And there was a scene in the documentary that just stuck with me. It was a moment when the passengers had a chance to make that one last phone call, that one call to their families. And I became fixated on that thought. I said, okay, if this is it, if this baby goes down, and this is how it all ends, and I had one phone call, what would I say? What would be that one last bit of advice I would want to give my daughters? Would you tell them you love them? That's good advice, maybe. I don't know. It's good to hear. But is that probably, is that really going to be the kind of advice that they're going to need when they come to those crossroads in their lives and they need a father's advice? Probably not. And I just kept thinking about it. Couldn't let this go. What would I say to them? That one last bit of advice could I give them that would serve them well for the rest of their lives? And I started thinking about how I got to be on this plane to begin with. And in this case, I was flying home from the NCAA Final Four. I had just been at a game that was played in front of the largest crowd to ever watch a live college basketball game. It was at Dallas Cowboys Stadium, and they were playing in the middle of the football field. Largest crowd to ever watch a game live, largest crowd to ever tune into a game on TV, and the largest crowd to ever watch a game online. It was a big event. And I had watched a player I coached get recognized during a game. And he received an award from the Allstate Insurance Company, the Good Works Award. It's basically for student athletes who use their position as a student athlete to go out into their communities and make a difference in their communities. And I started thinking about this young man and how well liked he was. He wasn't the best player on our team. Couldn't really jump that high, wasn't really fast, didn't score the most points. The more I think about it, he didn't really get to play that much. But everybody loved him. He was just adored by everybody on the team. The team mattered to him more than anything. It was his top priority. And because of that, he was a good teammate, a beloved teammate. And I thought, there it is. That's the advice I need to tell my daughters. Just be a good teammate. And you think about it, it makes sense. When you're a good teammate, you always have a support network. People want to be around you. They want to be surrounded by your generosity. So she'll have a support network. Check one. When you're a good teammate, you're always going to have financial security. Companies can't wait to hire people that put the needs of the company ahead of their own agendas. She'll always have financial security. Check 2. And then check 3, probably the most important one of all, she'll always have purpose in her life. Because good teammates serve the needs of their team. And service leads to purpose. Purpose leads to happiness. What more could any parent want than for their child to have happiness? And that became the essence of the first book I wrote. Now, I look back on it, this journey I've been on, it's really fallen into 3 phases. And that was phase 1. Those are some pretty deep thoughts. How do you explain those kind of abstract thoughts to a kindergartner? Well, you draw pictures. And that's what I did. When I got home off that flight, I sat down in our little home office, and I started sketching out these very rudimentary drawings. And, my daughter was learning to read back then, so she had sight words. If you've had a child who's gone through kindergarten, you have sight words. So I put out all her sight words from her class, and I tried to use as many of those to write sentences that explained what it meant to be a good teammate. My vision all along was she would read this. And I printed these off my little inkjet printer, which is what we had back then, and I folded the papers in half, and I went out about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I laid them down on the counter in our kitchen, and I went to bed. And that was all it was ever supposed to be. A little bit of last advice should something ever happen to Daddy. And I thought maybe we would read it together, and it would be fun for me to watch her read that to me. In fact, if you look at the book, I laugh at it every time I see it, because I wrote, by Coach Lance Loya. It was a joke. I mean, my kids like Dr. Seuss, and I read somewhere that Dr. Seuss wasn't really a doctor. I thought, well, I am a coach, so I'll put coach on there. And that was all it was. And now it became a stage name for me. It's our website, and that's became how I've been, became to be known as Coach Loya. And if you had kids involved in youth sports, you know that you as their parent can tell them the best advice imaginable, and they won't listen to you. But if the coach says it, then it's gospel truth. So I thought, well, if I'll write it, maybe they'll listen to it if Coach writes it instead of Dad. And that was it. That's all it was. Well, those things go. The book ended up being published. And what I wanted to do was give a theme to my daughter's lives, because I think it was very important for them to be good teammates. I wanted them to have those things, the happiness. So that's why I started. And it became a constant theme in their life. They couldn't escape those words, be a good teammate. They heard it all the time, and I'd see the difference it made in them. I mean, that message was omnipresent in their life. And back then I was running these summer youth camps. I have hundreds and hundreds of kids every week at these camps. And I started using some of the same things I talked about in the book with these kids. And eventually I renamed my camps, and I started calling them the Be a Good Teammate camps. And the kids ate it up. And the parents would come up to me, I don't know what you're saying to Johnny, but he's a completely different person at home. And they loved it. And I thought, this is it. This is it. This is what we should be doing with youth sports. Of all these great life lessons kids are learning through sports, dependability and hard work, all these great things, teaching a kid to be competitive should take a back seat to teaching them to be a good teammate, because that's the one life skill they're really going to need. When they go out into the workforce, they need to have that skill to get along. When they get married, they need to have that ability to get along, because they're always going to be a part of a team. And the book was written on, in two parts. The first was what it means to be a good teammate. Good teammates care, share, listen. Those were 3 of my daughter's sight words, by the way. The other part was everybody's part of a team. You don't have to play sports to be on a team. And I wanted them to know that, because how do you know if a 4-year-old is going to be involved in sports? Turned out they're involved in dance and a different type of team. But it wasn't sports, wasn't their route. So I'm glad I included that component of the book. Well, this book started to grow, and I really realized this is what we should be doing. This is what we should be doing with youth sports. And that kind of led to phase 2. I knew what I wanted to say, and I can't say that I really had any kind of burning desire to write a book. As a student, I never read books. I was a terrible reader, and I'm almost embarrassed to say that now. I don't really have very good writing skills, I didn't feel. But I had something to say. And I had something to say that I thought was of value. And I thought it was something that could help other people. And I had heard somewhere that, readers will overlook subpar writing if there's a good story. And that was just enough to tip the scales for me to put pen to paper, or fingers to keyboard, as it were. And I had a very loose premise for a story, and I wrote Building Good Teammates off of that premise. And the idea was, if we can convince coaches and teachers to make this their top priority, using sports to teach kids to be good teammates. And that's all I was trying to do. I wanted to spread that message. And the subtitle of that book was The Story of My Mount Rushmore, A Coaching Epiphany, and That None. And it was basically how I used to think, how I came to think in terms of what you should be emphasizing in sports. And the 4 people who influenced my life the most were my personal Mount Rushmore. And I believe we all have a personal Mount Rushmore, those 4 people who had the biggest influence on your life. And because of their influence, that's how I came to think of what we should be doing with sports. And we should be yelling at kids, and we should be hard on them, and and all the foul language. All those things should be done. That's how it's done. And those 4 members happened to be was my father, 2 of my coaches that I had played for, and my boss who had hired me. And I learned a lot from all of those men. But really what tipped the scale was this very unexpected and odd friendship I struck up with this 80-year-old nun. And she was the most amazing woman, and she still calls me all the time. And I don't know that I was a deeply religious person, but the friendship I developed with this octogenarian was special. And she really got me to think about the kind of mentor I was to kids. And the more I dived into this, and I started speaking and going out to groups and talking about this message, the more I realized, and this is where phase 3 came to be, this is bigger than sports. Companies fail because they don't have the right teammates in their organization. Families fail because they don't have people with a teammate mentality. I really realized that almost every affliction that plagues our society comes down to people not being good teammates. And I think, think about it, the school bullying, domestic violence, broken homes, the opioid epidemic, even like the shenanigans that go on in politics and on Wall Street. All of that comes down to people lacking a good teammate mentality. So I thought, well, how can we get people to think that way? What is it that good teammates do that most of us aren't doing? And I think most people want to be a good teammate. Most people think they are a good teammate. But most people don't put a lot of thought into it. They don't really think, well, what does a good teammate do? Why would you? So I set out on a quest to discover an answer to that question. And I started off looking at athletes and talking to players. And then, I started interviewing professional athletes. And then I started looking at teachers and leaders in other fields. Eventually I got to employees of the month. And I started looking at them, and I examined the best companies to work for. And I started thinking, what do people that work at that company? Why is that company so great? Why are they so great to work for? How do the people that work there think? And I started doing all these interviews, and I started to see a recurring theme. I saw these same 5 behaviors popping up over and over again. And when I put these 5 behaviors together, I thought, all right, so how do good teammates do it? How do they think? And I came up with the we gear. Now, there's a tradition at book launches that the author reads the introduction of the book and his favorite passage from the book. So without me explaining the full premise of the we gear, I thought it probably appropriate if I read the introduction. So, now, because I've read so much in the last couple years, I now have to don, and don't judge, they're drugstore glasses, but I do need them. Introduction. With just under 3 minutes to go in the men's basketball semifinal game of the 2016 Summer Olympics, the United States' DeAndre Jordan rebounded Sergio Rodriguez's missed shot. As a result of that rebound, Jordan tied the Olympic record for most rebounds in a game, a significant accomplishment considering the long, storied history of the sport. The United States would go on to defeat Spain 82-76. That, too, was a significant accomplishment, because most critics believe Spain posed the biggest threat to the United States' chances of winning another gold medal. Spain's roster included multiple NBA players as well as several seasoned international players who had the firepower to match the Americans. Spain dominated France in their previous game, winning 92-67, as compared to the United States, who had struggled to beat France in their earlier competition. DeAndre Jordan and his teammates barely squeaked by with a 3-point victory. After this semifinal win over Spain, sideline reporter Roslyn Gold Onwudi pulled Jordan aside for a post-game interview. Jordan's interview was a clinic on how to be a good teammate. Despite his significant individual accomplishment and the notable role he played in his team's big win, he repeatedly deflected attention away from himself. I sat on the couch in my living room watching the televised interview and marveling at Jordan's replies to her questions. He came across as humble, which seemed unusual for someone who had just performed a world-class individual feat. I had recorded the game and was so impressed with Jordan that I rewound his interview and watched it again. This time, I paid attention to the words he used. In the 52-second interview, Jordan used 15 first-person pronouns. Us once, our twice, and we 12 times. The frequency which he chose the word we instead of I caught my attention. He said we 12 times. We really needed it. We just got stops. We were able to execute our offense. Most people don't speak, let alone think that way. I mean, come on. Who really thinks or speaks that way? A good teammate does. My wife was sitting in the room when I replayed the video, and I remarked to her that DeAndre Jordan was in the we gear during that interview. The we gear. That was the first time I used the phrase, the we gear. Over the course of the next several months, I came to recognize the we gear as the perfect way to explain the art of being a good teammate, a subject to whose study, dissection, and understanding I have devoted my life. As humans, we live our lives in two gears, the me gear and the we gear. The me gear is all about me. What's in it for me? How does this benefit me? The me gear is our default gear and the epicenter of selfishness. Our focus is on ourselves. Cars with a manual transmission, i.e. a stick shift, aren't nearly as common as they once were. Today, less than 3% of the cars sold in the United States have a manual transmission. In fact, only 18% of licensed American drivers know how to drive a car with a manual transmission. To use what is in essence a lost art, shifting gears, to explain the art of being a good teammate seems strange. But the analogy captures exactly how good teammates operate. For those who know how to drive a manual transmission, bear with me while I briefly describe the process. With an automatic transmission, put the gear shift in D, and the car goes forward. Put the gear shift in R, and the car goes backwards. Put the gear shift in P, and the car stops. Just don't try to put the gear shift in P while the car is still moving forward or backwards. The P won't stand for park, but for problem, as in broken transmission problem. With a manual transmission, you must maneuver the gear shift by hand into the appropriate gears. When more power is needed up a steep hill, downshift into a lower gear. When speed is needed on the highway, upshift into a higher gear. But before shifting gears, drivers must depress the clutch pedal, that mysterious third pedal missing from automatic cars. When the time comes to shift gears, depress the clutch and choose the appropriate gear. This instant is known as a clutch moment. Humans have clutch moments in their lives too, stressful occasions that require them to make quick decisions about how they should proceed. When good teammates are faced with clutch moments, they choose to shift into the we gear. They make their choice by asking themselves, what's best for my team? The we gear is about cultivating the mindset and methods needed to be a better teammate. The we gear will give you the tools to inspire those on your team to be better teammates. The we gear will take you inside the fascinating psyche of a good teammate through touching and sometimes heartbreaking stories. The we gear will equip you with the insight you need to shift the focus of your life from me to we. I've discovered that this shift does not happen by accident. This shift is the result of an intentional commitment to 5 distinct behaviors that I explain using the acronym ALIVE, A-L-I-V-E. Together, we will explore the value of those behaviors and how each contributes to the formation of a good teammate. And by good teammate, I don't mean a passive follower who is content to simply get in line and practice conformity. I mean a person whose actions are defined by the purity of his intentions and by his willingness to put the needs of the team ahead of his own. I refer to individuals whose way of thinking propels the team towards success. In this context, the term team is not limited to a sports team. Your team can be your staff, co-workers, community, family, church. Everybody is part of a team in some capacity, and most belong to more than one team. Ultimately, how effective we are in our team role depends upon our ability to shift our focus from me to we. If you want to be a better teammate, coach, teacher, employee, boss, spouse, friend, or parent, this book is for you. So buckle up and get ready to shift gears. Get ready to discover the we gear.